Today on my drive, my unpopular opinion about one of the events from TakeOver Brooklyn 3, and more injuries plague the WWE, but is one of them a work? Today on the Go Home Spot. Welcome to the Go Home Spot. As always, part of the Wrasslun Show Network. And I'm starting to think I might need to change the name of this thing to WWE Injury Reports. Oh, another bad week. But at the same time, a good week after a successful takeover in SummerSlam. And what a takeover. As usual, every match was stellar. I do have a slight bone to pick, though, and it's probably going to be an unpopular opinion. And that was the closing of the show with Red Dragon and Adam Cole showing up. Wasn't completely a fan of this. I don't have anything against Adam Cole. I don't have anything against Red Dragon. In fact, if Red Dragon had actually shown up as baby faces, I would have thought they could have been contenders to defeat the Authors of Pain for the tag team titles. But Sanity took care of that, and then Red Dragon made their presence felt. It's no secret around the Go Home Spot that I'm a big Drew McIntyre fan. And it's not even that Cole and Red Dragon beat down Drew in general that I dislike. Despite being a Drew McIntyre fan, I'm fine with storylines and stuff like that. It's the fact that it was immediately after he won the title. And because everybody was so excited about seeing Adam Cole, the crowd was popping huge for it and chanting Adam Cole, Adam Cole. And then WWE released footage afterwards of Drew leaving the ring after the show went off the air, and you hear the Brooklyn crowd chanting 3MB, 3MB. And I suppose at the end of the day, that's kind of what bothered me more, because McIntyre really worked hard and busted his ass for the last 3 years that he was gone to not only make a name for himself, but to also better his craft. And he finally gets the NXT championship and has it for literally a matter of seconds before he's attacked by Adam Cole, who the crowd immediately latches onto, and it feels like Drew McIntyre's an afterthought now. That's what bugs me. Now, to be fair, this was only the one night, and because it's post-takeover, we haven't actually seen any NXT television since that has dealt with Cole or Red Dragon or Drew McIntyre. So the landscape of this budding feud could change very quickly. Also, the Brooklyn crowd is known to be one of those raucous crowds that really kind of, they're very much like a post-WrestleMania crowd. The beach balls in the audience at SummerSlam are another shining example of that. They're the type of crowd that kind of just wants to get themselves over sometimes. So it's not surprising that when they saw Cole, that they latched onto him. And again, I'm not trying to discredit Adam Cole whatsoever. I guess what I'm really getting at is if this was the main roster, that beatdown would have happened the next night on Raw, not at the end of the pay-per-view. But because it's NXT, and because they wouldn't have had a proper post-takeover NXT episode for at least 2 weeks, it means that they have to have this beatdown after the match if they want to keep it kind of timely to Drew winning. I don't know, I feel like when you've built someone up, as they have with McIntyre since he's still undefeated in NXT, and you have them get that moment where they win the championship, and then they just get beaten down by, it's not even the beatdown. I guess it's just how much the crowd loves Adam Cole, and that's kind of the way WWE audiences have been for a little while. It's not so much that they cheer the heels over the baby faces, but they appreciate good workers to the point that even if the worker's a heel, they'll still cheer for him. And Cole's a shining example of that. And it's not to say that Drew isn't a good worker, but with Cole just showing up with the announcement earlier that weekend that he had signed with WWE, naturally there was a buzz in the air. I don't know if there's really a point to this rant, because I don't really know who I'm throwing my anger at. Because it's not at Cole, not even necessarily at NXT Creative. I mean, I guess maybe it's that Brooklyn crowd. I do kind of wish they had waited before having Cole and company jump Drew. But at the same time, like I said, I understand if they had waited until the next set of NXT tapings, it would have been a week and a half at best after TakeOver. And I probably shouldn't be too hasty, because having Cole beat down Drew doesn't necessarily mean, oh, well, Cole's the horse that they're hitching their wagon to now, and he's the guy that they're going to put the title on, and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure Cole will eventually be NXT champion, but at the same time, it might not happen until the next TakeOver, which is still at least a couple of months away. So maybe I'm being a little too hasty, and I'm sure it's not a popular rant, but that's still how I feel. It just would have been nice for McIntyre to have his moment to kind of shine as far as being champion goes, but that's just me. I'm going to talk about some injuries coming up after this.
I'm Andrew Kent, and here's 5 reasons to listen to the We Have Till 5 podcast on the Wrasslun Show Network. Number 5, I'm handsome. Not that you would notice. Number 4, I love wrestling. You love wrestling. We both love wrestling, so you'll love this podcast. Number 3, I talk about everything, from worst pay-per-view names to best Chris Jericho feuds. Number 2, lists are pretty fun. And number 1, everyone's got their favorites. Where does mine line up with yours? Find out every Friday on the Wrasslun Show Network.
Oh, it was not a good week for injuries. 2 big injuries this week. I'll start with the one that happened at TakeOver, because it's kind of interesting. It's Asuka apparently broke her right collarbone during her match with Ember Moon. Reports are stating that she's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. But recently, rumors started kind of circulating that this injury could actually be a complete work, and that maybe she didn't actually break her collarbone. And at first when I heard that, I'm like, really? I don't know about that. But the more I thought about it, the more it kind of makes sense. Because at worst, if it were to take 8 weeks, Asuka would miss 2 sets of TV tapings, which would probably run roughly about 2 months worth of programming. And yes, to not have your women's champion on the TV for 2 months, it's not a good thing. But that being said, you don't see a ton of title matches on NXT television anyways. Quite often, they're reserved for takeovers. So they could have Asuka make a couple of appearances outside of wrestling, cut some promos or whatever. If they start having a new number 1 contender match or tournament or something, maybe she could go out there and be sitting ringside. So it wouldn't have been the end of the world, except at the NXT tapings that took place this week, Asuka relinquished her NXT Women's Championship. And it was very much treated like Asuka's NXT farewell. Regal was in the ring with her. All the other NXT superstars were up on the stage, giving her a standing ovation. So it was treated very much like her NXT exit. So the reason this is kind of starting to look like it might be a work is that now you have Asuka able to drop the championship without actually losing it, which also thus keeps her undefeated streak intact. They treat her relinquishing the title like she's leaving NXT, which clearly means, if that's the case, that she's moving up to the main roster. Now, they can use her undefeated streak on the main roster and say she was undefeated in NXT, and here she is on the main roster. At the same time, WWE typically, I don't want to say ignores someone's NXT past, but they don't often bring it up once someone's on the main roster. But this could be the thing that changes that. Because whenever you've got someone who's undefeated for as long as she is, and who held a championship for over 500 days, it's not something you just don't mention. Now, I don't really like suggesting that this might be a work, simply because if it's not, I don't like the idea of basically telling someone who's hurt or injured, oh, they're just faking it. And it's not exactly the case, but still, it's just starting to look that way. Either way, whether the injury is legit or a work, Asuka will be back in a ring within 6 to 8 weeks, and by the looks of things, it's going to be either a red ring or a blue ring. And it'll certainly be interesting which show Asuka goes to. Things are a little less optimistic for the other injury that took place. This one was on Raw. Big Cass was taking on his former tag team partner, Enzo Amore, in what I'm assuming was supposed to be the blow-off match of this feud. It was a Brooklyn street fight, both men kind of on home turf here. I'm guessing this was basically supposed to be a squash match, except at one point, Cass went for a big boot on Enzo when he was on the apron. Enzo pulled down the top rope. Cass tumbled to the floor, and he immediately clutched his knee. He made it back in the ring, knocked Enzo down with a boot, went for his elbow drop, but before he could even leap, collapsed, holding his knee again. Officials came down, started talking to him, and a ring announcement was made that due to Big Cass being unable to compete to finish the match, Enzo Amore was declared the winner. After Raw, it was announced that yes, Cass tore his ACL and possibly his meniscus, and it was looking like he was going to be out for about 9 months. And that's just heartbreaking for Cass. While I was never a fan of this whole story arc, I don't think they should have split them up to begin with. It's still the guy's livelihood, you know. It sucks that this happens and now he's going to be out 9 months, especially as they've just started this solo heel run of his, and he didn't even really have a chance to get out of the gate. And now he's stuck rehabbing his knee for almost a year. Obviously, it means he's going to miss WrestleMania. So I feel bad for the guy. I do. But at the same time, feeling the way I have about this whole Enzo and Cass storyline that's gone on for the past month and a half, given the fact that Cass has brutalized and squashed Enzo and Big Show at virtually every turn, from a kayfabe perspective, it's almost poetic justice that Enzo managed to win the blow-off match. I mean, arguably it was by default, but a win's a win, I guess, right? Speaking of Enzo, after his win on Raw, he hopped on over to the Purple Show as he debuted on 205 Live, interrupting WWE Cruiserweight Champion Neville. A lot of people speculated that this was probably where Enzo was going to go. It'll be interesting to see how he fits. There certainly isn't a personality in 205 Live quite like Enzo Amore, so it'll be interesting. But speaking of Neville, if you have a chance, backtracking a little bit here, if you have a chance to check out the TakeOver pre-show, during the pre-show they had various guests to chat with, and one of them was Neville. And man, I cannot get enough of Neville's heel character. Like, just, he is so good. And it's just this kind of very slow cadence and a very serious look on his face. Like, there is no humor to this guy whatsoever. And I love it so much. I almost wish he wasn't on 205 Live so I could see him more. And I realize all I would need to do is watch 205 Live more to see him, but I just need the time. There's so much wrestling to get through in a week. I catch what I can, but I don't always get everything. But if you have a chance, go back and watch that TakeOver pre-show, if for no other reason, just to hear Neville's promo, because it's fantastic. The big news coming out of Monday Night Raw is we have our main event set for No Mercy. It's going to be Brock Lesnar putting up the Universal Championship against Braun Strowman one-on-one. So it's probably a safe bet that this is where Brock's going to lose the title. A lot of people thought he was going to lose it in the Fatal 4-Way. I said so in my predictions, but I also was predicting with my heart and not my head because I really liked Samoa Joe. I was hoping he was going to take it. But I started having my doubts late into the weekend before the pay-per-view. And obviously I was right to have my doubts, but still, I didn't pick Brock to win. So during the face-to-face with Lesnar and Strowman, the crowd actually started a Strowman chant in the style of the Goldberg chant. It's hard to tell if it was meant in a somewhat mocking tone or if this is going to be the thing with Strowman. I'm guessing this is going to wind up becoming a regular thing. And Strowman is now going to get the Goldberg-style chant. Strowman got some big pops in this segment as well. Clearly, he is very over in the crowd, and that's good to see because he's been getting these pops for a while, but the majority of the time he was feuding with Roman Reigns, so it was always kind of tough to tell if he was getting the pops for himself or because he was beating on Reigns. Clearly now, it was at the very least for himself, if not maybe a little bit of both. But it's good to see that he's still over and the fans still like him. And that tells me that, yeah, he's probably going to take the title at No Mercy. My personal opinion would be to leave it till WrestleMania, but Jim Ross actually talked about that in his most recent podcast, saying that the landscape's different now with pay-per-views, and people don't always have the patience to wait X number of months for the big show. Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger a little early. And that's where Strowman versus Lesnar at No Mercy comes in. Plus, if you have Strowman take the Universal Championship at No Mercy, number one, you've built a new monster. If he beats Brock Lesnar one-on-one and takes the title from him, you've built a new monster. Kind of like they did with Goldberg last year when he squashed Lesnar at Survivor Series. Only this time, it's not somebody who has the reputation that preceded Goldberg. It's someone who's fairly new to the company, only been around a couple of years, and who's had a rocket strapped to his back. And if you have Strowman take the Universal title at No Mercy, and you have him hold it to WrestleMania, then you have all that time to build him up as a monster and have someone win the Royal Rumble to then slay that monster come WrestleMania. And if that's the direction they go, oh, I hope it's not Reigns. I like Reigns and all, and him and Strowman have great chemistry, and I'm sure they would tear the house down at WrestleMania, but Reigns needs a break from the title picture. Plus, rumor has it they're going to be leaning towards a Roman Reigns-John Cena match at WrestleMania. So we'll see. Still months away. The landscape can be changed in a heartbeat. But speaking of Reigns and Cena, they had a little bit of a face-to-face in the ring. Cena showed up on Raw, so I guess he's going to be a Raw exclusive guy now for a little bit. They did say he's a free agent when he first returned on SmackDown. So I don't know if that means he'll be doing double duty or if it's going to be he's on SmackDown for a while and he's on Raw for a while and then maybe back to SmackDown, or if he's just going to stay on Raw the whole time. So this is definitely planting seeds for WrestleMania, because when Cena came out and started his promo, he said there was one guy that he was there to see. Before he got to say who, of course, Roman's music hit. Said it was his yard, to a chorus of boos. And then enter The Miz, who cut a fantastic, wonderful, intense promo about how the two of them constantly have their moments and have things handed to them while he has to work so hard. And that's the beautiful thing about The Miz. Like, he's a heel, but a lot of things he says certainly have, at the very least, kind of a nugget of truth. And with how intense he is, he even got the crowd behind him to chant a "You deserve it" chant for The Miz. Now, being that he's a heel, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But either way, any reaction is better than no reaction. Samoa Joe then came out as well, which set up for the main event, which was Cena and Reigns versus Joe and Miz, which of course the baby faces came out on top. Other matches on Raw, the Hardys came out and congratulated two-thirds, the new tag team champions of Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, because I refuse to call them the Shield. They're two-thirds of the Shield. So that's what I'm calling them. Two-thirds came out on top in the match. It was actually a pretty good match, I must say. It is certainly going to be interesting to see what the tag team landscape on Raw is going to look like with Revival gone. Right now, Raw does seem to have more credible tag teams for title feuds than, say, SmackDown does. But still, it's going to be interesting to see where we go. Obviously, the Hardys were supposed to feud with Revival, but that's not going to happen now. So, will we get the club back into this? Sheamus and Cesaro, obviously, will get a rematch at some point down the line. Also, how long are Rollins and Ambrose going to hold the tag titles? I don't see it being a tremendously long reign. I'd expect Rollins and Ambrose to drop the titles before the end of the calendar year. Although it'll be interesting to see to whom they drop those titles. Rounding out the matches on Raw was a pretty good match between Finn Balor and Jason Jordan. Interesting to see the babyface versus babyface match. I still don't know exactly where they're going with Jordan. I think the jury is still out on whether or not this whole Son of Angle thing was a success or a flop. Unfortunately, the less it gets mentioned on Raw, the closer it probably will lean towards not being a success. To be honest, I expected a feud with Miz, and I thought Jordan was going to be a lock for the Intercontinental Championship down the line. But I'm wondering if they're hesitating on that, considering they're just putting Jordan in matches, and now he lost to Finn Balor, which, don't get me wrong, is the right move. Balor's the bigger star, but where do we go from here with Jason Jordan? Well, I know where I'm going from here. That's on to SmackDown. Talk about the blue brand right after this.
Hey, it's at Adam Colton.
And at Matthew Sukram.
We do the Wrasslun Show podcast.
And it is tons of fun.
What happened on Raw this week? What went down on SmackDown? We're going to tell you what we think.
Who's going to win the big match at the upcoming pay-per-view? Do they still call them pay-per-views?
We run the gamut. Everything from Cuban hotel guys to bloodthirsty Canadians. My wife just texted, I'm going to cut someone.
Case in point, bloodthirsty Canadians.
It's the Wrasslun Show podcast.
Streaming now on the Wrasslun Show Network.
As many people speculated, Shelton Benjamin made his return. He came to SmackDown, and he is the new tag team partner of Chad Gable. So I don't know if they're just going to be Benjamin and Gable. I don't know if they're going to be American Alpha 2.0. But I'm very, very interested in seeing how they're going to mesh as a tag team, which we'll find out this coming week. Benjamin got a big pop whenever he appeared on screen, so good fans are very happy to see him back. Nakamura got a victory in a 2-on-1 match against the Singh brothers. Not surprising. Also good to see that Shinsuke is not done with the title picture. After coming up a little bit short at SummerSlam in his attempt to gain the championship, Nakamura got attacked by Jinder Mahal after the match, but Shinsuke managed to hit the Kinshasa on the champion, proving that he can still take him out, and proving that this feud is far from over. Probably the biggest news coming out of SmackDown was the main roster debut of the glorious Bobby Roode. This has me interested because Roode took on the thespian threat Aiden English, who is a heel. Roode spent his entire time in NXT as a heel, but during his debut, he got massive pops. If you had never watched NXT and you were watching this for the first time, you'd swear Roode was the babyface. But after the match, he cut a little promo, which certainly still had that cocky edge to him. So it's hard to tell if Roode is going to be a heel as he starts his main roster run or a babyface. Because the majority of people who come up from NXT tend to stay what they were when they left, as far as heel or face goes. So I'm happy to see Roode on the main roster. Happy to see him on SmackDown. I think that'll be a good fit for him. It'll just be interesting to see what they do with him. Speaking of what's interesting, AJ Styles took on Kevin Owens for the United States Championship yet again, and this time Owens was able to pick his own guest ref. He wound up choosing Baron Corbin, who of course was not fair and was leaning very heavily towards Kevin Owens' side during the match, although at one point when Owens cheated, Shane McMahon came down, pulled Corbin out of the ring. They got in an argument. Corbin takes off the ref shirt, throws it aside, and quits being the ref. So what does Shane do? Naturally, he puts on the shirt and finishes the match as the referee, in which AJ Styles once again comes out on top and is still the United States champion. Seems pretty obvious that they're leaning towards some sort of feud between Owens and Shane McMahon. The question is this a feud similar to, say, what Chris Jericho had with Stephanie McMahon back in the day, where he's obviously not going to wrestle Stephanie and Owens may not wrestle Shane? Or is this something that they're building where we're going to see Kevin Owens versus Shane McMahon at Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble or even WrestleMania, although that seems a little far to be building this? Considering WWE's penchant to have Shane involved and wrestle guys, he's wrestled at the last 2 WrestleManias, he wrestled at last year's Survivor Series, he was a referee at SummerSlam. I'm guessing they're heading in the direction of a Kevin Owens versus Shane McMahon match somewhere down the line, which I'm kind of indifferent over. Being that Shane technically isn't a worker, I get kind of annoyed when he's constantly put in there with wrestlers and he's on their level. But at the same time, I understand that he's a spectacle, he's a special attraction, and people like to see him. So, from the dollar sign perspective, I understand. Shane's music says it all. Here comes the money. It's a fairly quiet episode of NXT this week, as most post-takeover NXTs are, emanating from the Barclays Center. So obviously, they recorded this probably before TakeOver. It's hard for me to judge. When I went to TakeOver Toronto, I had gotten there just as the TakeOver show was starting, so I wasn't sure if they'd filmed the NXT TV stuff prior to, but they obviously didn't film it after, so that's my guess, and that's probably what they do with most takeovers. So obviously, nobody on the show was on this edition of NXT TV, but we did get some decent matches. We were going to have No Way Jose versus Lars Sullivan, but it wound up being a no contest because Lars blew his stack, as he often does, beating the dance moves out of No Way Jose. And I'll be honest, it's refreshing to at least see Lars Sullivan not beating up his tag team partner, which he usually does. Peyton Royce picked up a victory against Sarah Logan in what was a pretty decent match. The main event featured a United Kingdom tag team match as Mustache Mountain, Trent Seven, and former United Kingdom champion Tyler Bate took on current champion Pete Dunne and his tag team partner Wolfgang. This was actually a really great match. I'll be honest, I didn't actually watch the UK tournament, but the more I see of a lot of these guys that were involved in that tournament, the more I want to go back and actually watch it. I just need to find the time. So if you get a chance, check out this tag team match. It was fantastic. Like I said, big fan of all these guys. Bate and Dunn's UK title match from TakeOver Chicago a few months back was fantastic. It's all definitely worth checking out. Speaking of great matches, I'll have my bonus video content this week with my match of the week. I'm not going to disclose what it is yet, but I will give you a hint. It is from TakeOver. Doesn't narrow it down much considering those were 5 great matches, but it gives you something to ponder until you can hop over to the Wrasslun Show Network's YouTube and see what I chose. I'm going to take a page out of my buddy Adam's book. I'm going to give you a call to action this week. Do me a favor, share this podcast with someone. That's all the news that's fit to print this week. Do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can find me on Twitter at @TheGoHomeSpot. Check out our YouTube channel. All the Wrasslun Show Network shows have bonus video content every week. So it's not just a podcast. You get our lovely, lovely visuals as well. For the Go Home Spot, I'm Jeff DeHaan. Sometimes you go big, sometimes you go home.
presentation of the Wrasslun Show Network, where everything is wrestling and wrestling is everything.